me I was crazy, but I saw it. We have to go now, before it finds us.
Misty Appalachian campground at night, faint outlines of distant tents through thick fog, shadows weaving between twisted trees, a lone camper holding a paper cup of coffee looking nervously toward the treeline, dense forest trail disappearing into fog, sunlight barely breaking through treetops, hiker pausing mid-step as if sensing something unseen, creek at a quiet campground with an older woman sitting on a folding chair, feet in water, pale colorless eyes staring ahead, abandoned tent. Visible in the background, early morning fog over deserted campsites, faint rustling of leaves, subtle shadowy figure barely visible between the trees, cinematic depth of field, muted natural colors, soft reflective water surfaces, quiet suspenseful tension, storytelling framing, atmospheric psychological horror, realistic textures. Wet leaves, moss, gravel paths, tent nylon, volumetric lighting, subtle supernatural hints, mood-heavy cinematic composition, safe for all audiences. Cinematic. Suspenseful Appalachian forest environment, dense fog, soft diffused light, muted natural color palette, atmospheric tension, psychological horror tone, no gore or graphic violence, subtle horror, mysterious shadows, eerie quiet, abandoned tents and campfires, twisted trees, overgrown paths, realistic characters with authentic clothing. Casual hiking gear, withered older woman, ordinary camper, shadows hinting at supernatural presence, facial expressions conveying fear, curiosity, and dread. Volumetric lighting, depth of field emphasizing isolation, quiet suspense, realistic textures. Wet leaves, moss, gravel paths, tent nylon, reflective water surfaces, cinematic composition, storytelling framing, mood-heavy, storytelling focused, safe for all audiences. By the time morning reached the campground, the scream felt unreal, like something I'd imagined in a half-dream, the way your brain invents details to explain fear. The fog thinned as the sun climbed, revealing tents hunched low beneath the trees, their rainflies damp and sagging. Campers moved quietly, eyes down, voices lowered, as if sound itself might wake something. No one mentioned the scream. That was the strangest part. I stood near my car with a paper cup of burnt coffee, watching a park ranger talk to a couple near Site 14. He nodded too much, smiled too easily. Whatever they were saying, he didn't write it down. When he walked away, he avoided looking toward the treeline where the sound had come from. I told myself there were explanations. Foxes scream like people. So do bobcats. Wind can carry noise in ways that don't make sense at night. Appalachia is full of echoes. Valleys folding sound over itself, turning distance into deception. Still, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I hadn't planned on staying long. Just 3 nights, cheap escape, no signal, a borrowed tent, and a trail map older than me. I worked IT support in Columbus, lived in an apartment that smelled like someone else's cooking, and hadn't slept well in months. When my doctor suggested unplugging, this was the only version of unplugging I could afford. The campground brochure called the place Laurel Fork Primitive Site. That word, primitive, should have warned me. No showers, no electric, no cell service past the ranger station. Just trees stacked on trees, hills that blocked the sky, and trails that seemed to loop back on themselves no matter how carefully you followed the markers. The scream came from somewhere past the old maintenance road, beyond the posted trail limits. That much I was sure of. It hadn't sounded like pain at first. It sounded like recognition, like someone had seen something they weren't supposed to. Around noon, I tried asking questions. A man sharpening a knife near the fire pit wouldn't meet my eyes. A family packing up early said they had a long drive. When I mentioned the noise, their mother flinched like I'd sworn in front of a child. Finally, I found someone who didn't walk away. She was older, late 60s maybe, sitting alone on a folding chair near the creek, shoes off, feet in the water. Her campsite looked untouched, like she'd been there for years and had stopped trying to make it comfortable. No radio, no lantern, just a bedroll and a cast iron pan blackened with use. I told her about the scream. She listened without interrupting, eyes fixed on the water as it slid over the stones. When I finished, she nodded once, slow. "That happens," she said. "What does?" I asked. She finally looked at me then. Her eyes were pale, almost colorless. People hearing things they weren't meant to, she said. Or people becoming them. I laughed. It came out wrong, too loud, too sharp. So, animals? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned forward and picked something up from the creek bed. A rusted tent stake. Bent, twisted like it had been pulled sideways through rock. They tell stories about these woods, she said. But stories aren't warnings. They're leftovers. I didn't know what to say to that. She stood, wiped her feet, and slipped her shoes on without sitting down. As she passed me, she spoke again. Quiet, flat, like she was reciting a fact she'd learned the hard way. If you hear your name tonight, she said, don't answer. I watched her walk toward the trees and disappear between them. No trail, no sound of branches snapping. Just gone. The rest of the afternoon dragged. Clouds rolled in thick and low, pressing the forest down until it felt smaller, tighter. The woods weren't quiet exactly, but they weren't alive either. No birds. No insects. Just wind sliding through leaves like breath across teeth. I tried hiking to distract myself. The trail markers grew farther apart the deeper I went. Their paint faded. Some turned slightly away from the path like they didn't want to look at it anymore. Once I swore I saw someone ahead of me. Just a shape, pale against the trees. But when I called out, there was no response. No movement. The trail curved, and the shape was gone. By dusk, I was back at my site. Setting up lanterns I suddenly felt foolish for thinking were enough. The shadows pooled too thick between the trees, swallowing the space beyond the fire ring. Smoke rose straight up, unmoving as if the air itself were holding its breath. That was when I noticed something wrong. My tent zipper, one I was sure I'd closed, hung open an inch or two. Just enough to matter. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. My sleeping bag lay where I'd left it. Backpack untouched. But the sense of intrusion clung to me, oily and cold. Like a room after someone's been standing in it too long. As night fell, the campground lights went dark one by one. Campfires dwindled. Doors zipped. Voices vanished. I lay awake listening. Wind. Leaves. My own breathing. Then, somewhere beyond the maintenance road, deeper than any trail was supposed to go, something moved and stopped. I waited for a scream. Instead, I heard my name. I didn't answer. That choice, small, instinctive, felt like the first real decision I'd made since arriving. My mouth stayed shut. My breath slowed. I stared at the nylon wall of my tent as if it might blink back. The voice had sounded right. That was the worst part. Not loud. Not distorted. Just familiar. Casual even. The way someone says your name when they're standing a few feet behind you and don't want to startle you. I told myself it came from another campsite. Someone talking in their sleep. A trick of sound sliding downhill through the trees. Appalachia was full of that, according to the brochures. According to people who didn't have to hear their own names spoken in the dark by something they couldn't see. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Nothing else happened. Eventually, exhaustion won. When I woke, the fire had burned down to ash, and the woods were brighter than they should have been for dawn. Light filtered through the trees at odd angles, as if the sun were lower than usual, or farther away. My phone was dead. I didn't remember plugging it in, didn't remember using it. Still, the battery read 0. Outside, the campground felt thinner. Not emptier, thinner. Like a stage set after the actors have gone home. Site 14 was vacant. The couple from yesterday were gone, their fire ring cold, their tire tracks already softened by fallen leaves. 2 more campsites stood abandoned, tents gone but footprints still pressed into the mud, leading nowhere in particular. I went looking for the ranger station. The path that should have led there narrowed after 100 yards, then narrowed again. Trees leaned inward, their branches crossing overhead. The trail marker, a yellow blaze on an oak, had been scratched almost completely away, clawed down to pale wood. That was when I noticed the smell. Not rot. Not smoke. Metal. I followed it off the trail before I realized I'd done so. The ground dipped into a shallow hollow. hidden by ferns and moss. Something lay at its center, half covered by leaves. At first, I thought it was a deer. Then I saw the boot. A hiking boot. Human. I stopped short, heart hammering, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. No birds fled. No insects buzzed. The silence pressed in until my ears rang. The body, if it was a body, was face down, twisted at an angle that made my knees ache just looking at it. No blood. No obvious wounds. Just stillness. Wrong stillness. I didn't touch it. I backed away slowly, marking trees, counting steps, repeating directions under my breath like a prayer. When I reached the trail again, relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. That's when I realized something else. My footprints weren't there. Only one set of tracks led away from the hollow. None led back. I ran. By the time I reached the campground, my chest burned and my thoughts felt slippery, like they wouldn't hold still long enough to make sense. A few campers had emerged. Faces drawn, movements stiff. Everyone avoided the tree lean. I found the woman from the creek sitting exactly where she'd been the day before. "You saw it," she said before I could speak. My throat worked. "There's someone out there." She nodded. "There always is." "Dead?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Not yet." I stared at her. Then what was that? She picked at a splinter in her chair. A leftover. I waited for more. It didn't come. Finally, she sighed and stood. "You ever hear about the long camps?" she asked. I shook my head. "Places people stop for a night and never quite leave," she said. "They wake up, walk around, talk to folks, but they're not on the same schedule anymore." "That's not possible." She looked at me, then really looked. "You think this place runs on your rules?" She told me about the maintenance road, how it used to lead to logging camps back in the 1930s, temporary settlements, men living too long in the woods, too far from towns, losing track of days. Some went missing. Some came back wrong. Talking about voices that called them deeper, about trails that rearranged themselves, about hearing their names spoken by trees, by stones, by nothing at all. "They say the woods learned how to keep people," she said. "Not bodies. Moments." I wanted to leave. Right then. Pack up. Drive until the mountains flattened and the sky widened and the world made sense again. But my keys were gone. I tore my campsite apart. Checked pockets. Backpack. Car. Nothing. The driver's door stood unlocked, like I'd never closed it. Around us, the campground buzzed with low conversation now. Whispers slipping between sights. A man argued with his wife in sharp, frightened bursts. I locked it. "I know you did." "Then where are they?" Another camper, a teenager pale and shaking, kept asking if anyone else had heard singing last night. No one answered him. As evening crept in again, the woman touched my arm. "It started noticing you," she said. "What does that mean?" She hesitated. For the first time, she looked afraid. "It means you answered without speaking." That night, the woods didn't wait. Voices drifted between the trees. Murmurs, half-words, the rhythm of conversation without meaning. Shadows shifted where no body stood. My tent zipper moved on its own, just a fraction, then stilled. I lay frozen, eyes open, listening as footsteps circled my campsite. Slow, careful, like something learning how to walk the way I do. The footsteps stopped just outside the ring of lantern light. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Each one sounded too loud, like the woods were listening through me. The nylon wall of the tent bowed inward slightly, then relaxed as if a hand had pressed against it and thought better of it. A whisper slid along the ground. Not words. Not yet. I squeezed my eyes shut and remembered the woman's warning. "If you hear your name tonight, don't answer." As if silence were a shield. As if not speaking meant you weren't seen. Something unzipped the tent. Slowly. Metal teeth parting, one by one, with deliberate patience. Whoever, or whatever, was outside knew how tents worked. Knew how people worked. I sat up. heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. The opening widened just enough for darkness to pool inside. The lantern flickered, then steadied. Shadows crawled along the floor like spilled ink. A shape leaned down. It didn't come all the way in. It stayed half outside, as if the tent were a boundary it had to respect, or was choosing to. I could see its outline now. Human-shaped. Too thin. Too tall. Its head tilted at an angle that made my neck ache in sympathy. Then it spoke. "Hey," it said. My voice. My exact voice. "You awake?" Something inside me broke loose. I scrambled backward, hitting the tent wall, knocking the lantern over. Light spun wildly, throwing fragments of the thing across the fabric. Too many limbs, then not enough. The zipper screamed as it opened the rest of the way. I ran. I burst into the campground, screaming for help, my feet barely touching the ground. Other tents erupted around me. Zippers, shouts, panic tearing through the dark like fire through dry leaves. People poured out, wild-eyed, half-dressed. Someone grabbed my arm. "Where?" A man shouted. I pointed toward my site. Nothing stood there. My tent hung open, empty. Lantern rolling gently in the dirt. No footprints. No shadow. Just the trees watching. A woman started crying. Someone else swore. A child screamed that someone was standing by the cars. We turned. Figures stood at the edge of the clearing. At first glance, they looked like people. Campers, hikers, rangers. But none of them moved quite right. They stood too still, heads cocked, mouths slightly open as if waiting for lines they'd forgotten. One stepped forward. "Can you help me?" It asked in a dozen overlapping voices. "I'm lost." The air thickened. Sound felt delayed, like it had to push through syrup to reach us. The fire pits flared without fuel. Shadows bent the wrong way. The woman from the creek pushed through the crowd. "Don't listen," she shouted. "Don't talk to them. Don't." One of the figures turned toward her. "Why did you stay?" it asked. Her husband's voice. She staggered like she'd been struck. That was when the screaming started. The figures moved. Not walking, sliding, crossing ground without effort. Campers scattered, crashing into tents, tripping over roots that hadn't been their seconds before. The maintenance road stretched and curved, leading nowhere. Cars refused to start. Headlights flickered on roads that didn't exist. I ran toward the woods without meaning to. The trees opened for me. I was back on the maintenance road, but it wasn't a road anymore. Just a corridor of packed earth and memories. Shapes flickered in my peripheral vision. Men in old logging clothes, women calling for children, tents made of canvas and hope. Voices layered over each other. "Just one night. Don't go yet. You promised." I heard myself talking somewhere behind me. Laughing. Telling someone it was fine. That I'd stay. I turned. I saw me. Not a mirror, an echo. Same clothes. Same panic in the eyes. Just a second behind my own movements. Its mouth moved a fraction too late. Understanding hit like ice water. This place didn't kill you. It kept you. I ran harder, lungs tearing, mind unraveling. Time stuttered. The woods repeated themselves. The scream from the first night echoed again and again, looping. At the edge of the clearing, the woman stood waiting. "Choose," she said, voice steady despite the chaos. "You can stay whole and lose yourself, or leave broken and remember." "How?" I screamed. She stepped aside, revealing a narrow gap between two trees. Dark, quiet, empty. Behind me, my echo reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve. I jumped through the gap. The woods screamed. Everything collapsed inward. Voices, shadows, memories slamming together like closing jaws. I felt something tear loose inside my head, a piece of me left behind, calling my name as I fell forward into blackness. Silence swallowed me whole. I woke to sunlight that wasn't sunlight. Pale, diffuse light that seemed to press down instead of rise. I was lying on gravel by the side of a road I didn't recognize. Thin, winding, bordered by trees that looked like shadows trying to stand upright. My car was gone. My backpack too. Nothing from the campground remained. At first, I thought I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But the memory, the voices, the echo, the shape that mimicked me, clung to my chest like a weight that didn't belong. I tried to shake it off. Tried to tell myself it was sleep deprivation, that the woman was a local with a morbid sense of humor, that the scream was just an animal. But my hands, when I looked, were scratched, dirty in ways that couldn't happen from gravel alone. My boots were wet in patches, muddy in others, like I'd been running through streams that didn't exist. My throat was raw from screaming. And my name, it still echoed. I walked for hours, or maybe minutes. Time didn't make sense. Every road I took curved back on itself. Every town I passed was empty, stores shuttered, lights dead. Sometimes I swore I saw someone standing at the edge of the woods, or someone I was supposed to recognize. They never moved when I approached, just stared, waiting. By nightfall, I found a small gas station. A man behind the counter looked normal. Too normal. He smiled, too slow, eyes too pale. I asked him where I was. He tilted his head, thin smile stretching, and said, "You're fine. Just don't answer when they call." I froze. My heart slammed. That voice, the exact cadence of the woman, the echoes in the woods, every whisper, I could feel it crawling through the air behind me. I spun around. Empty. Just the wind. I left the gas station and walked down the road. Shadows stretched like black fingers across the pavement. Trees lined the highway like silent sentinels. And somewhere, far enough away to feel safe, close enough to hear clearly, I heard it. My voice, calling my name. I didn't answer. I keep moving. Day after day, road after road. I've tried to go back to find that campground again, to check if the woman's warning meant anything. But the roads shift. Trails vanish. Towns disappear. Sometimes I see someone familiar in the corner of my eye. Myself, or someone I was once. I blink and they're gone. The truth is simple. I survived, but not completely. Part of me, the part that heard its name whispered in the dark and stayed silent, is still out there. Waiting. Observing. Learning. And some nights when the wind presses against the windows, I swear I hear it again. My own voice, calling my name from somewhere far, deep, and impossible to reach. I never answer. Not anymore. The woods, whatever they are, always remember. And they never forgive.